Today on Inside Utah Politics, EMS in crisis. Rural County Commissioners say emergency medical services are in need of rescue themselves. We're looking into the problem and potential solutions. Plus, moms marching on Utah's Capitol Hill asking lawmakers to act on new gun laws, the two bills they are pushing for, and why they are facing an uphill battle.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. This morning, we begin with Paiute County Commissioner Darren Bushman and Beaver County Commissioner Mark Whitney. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, man.
Where's your cowboy hat?
I'm allergic to horses. What can I say?
All right. I think I've seen you with one on before.
Maybe once.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get into this issue. This is a serious issue.
It is a serious issue.
EMS services across the state of Utah, specifically in rural communities, which the two of you represent. Give us an overall picture of what's happening with the state of those services right now.
Well, right now what's going on is we're forced out of service more than we're in service in a lot of cases. And when we're out of service in a county because of lack of volunteers or personnel to run, then we rely on the neighboring counties, which now puts an undue burden on them. They're struggling to respond to their calls. You'll remember the bus crash in Garfield County. Paiute County was out of service. We had no personnel to send. Our sheriff literally got in an empty ambulance and drove it to the scene. We had EMTs that work out of the county responding from as far as 100 miles away to get there to actually operate that rig.
So, Mark, talk about the impact that has on your area. You guys represent geographically huge counties in the state of Utah.
Yeah, we do. Well, and plus we've got I-15 running right through the middle of our county, and so there's millions and millions of vehicles driving on that road. And a lot of people don't know this, but police and fire protection is mandated under the state code. EMS is not. It's a volunteer type service. It's expected, but it is not mandated. So thank goodness to these good volunteers that we've got in our counties that run these ambulances to protect our lands, not only the people on I-15, but in Darren's County, there's a lot of recreationists in our county that come from the Wasatch Front.
Yeah, we'll get into both of those issues more in a little bit. Darren, let's dig a little deeper into this. Why are we in the state we're in right now?
So we've got a number of things that have occurred. There's a mindset shift away from volunteerism, and people are very busy in their lives these days. I think it takes both family members to make a living. Struggling to get volunteers. To become certified has increased. The time commitment has increased substantially, and the state went to an outside agency, the National Association of EMTs, to certify people. We've really struggled to get people through that certification process. There's just generally not enough people coming in to volunteer to do this.
But there are also budget issues as well.
There are. So the Bureau in 2007 took a pretty major cut to their general fund budget, about 57%. And then there's also a grant fund that's available to local agencies like mine that I think that's taken roughly a 60% cut since 2007. So we're down to about $700,000 that gets distributed across every agency in the state in that per capita thing. And there's virtually no capital grant funds available through the Bureau anymore. So when you're buying a $200,000 ambulance in Paiute County, that's 20% of our general fund budget.
Okay. You already used an example of the bus crash, but in general, what are we seeing the impacts from this? Like, what is an average response time because of the situation we're in right now?
Well, we have long response times anyways. In Paiute County, the closest hospital either way is 30 or 40 minutes, okay? So we have long response times. But our challenge now, and we had an incident just recently where we were out of service. Garfield County was over an hour away. They dispatched Sevier County to an elderly gentleman who had fallen, and he's 40 plus minutes before an ambulance even arrived at the door.
Yeah.
And then he's looking at a 30 to 40 minute transport to a hospital.
So in a life or death situation, that's not a good situation.
Yeah, the American Heart Association says anything over 12 minutes is non-survivable.
So we're talking about rural Utah, but this really is a Utah issue because all of us go down and enjoy time in rural Utah. It could be us at any time. Talk about that, Mark.
Well, again, as I say, rural Utah is literally the playground for urban Utah. That's where a lot of people from the Wasatch Front like to come, and we welcome them. We love to have them down there. But again, my county is not faced nearly as stagnant on the issue as Darren's county in Paiute. We're lucky we have ambulance services in Beaver, Minersville, and Milford, all about 10 minutes to 15 minutes apart. But still, we have to provide that service, and that service right now is on the backs of our local taxpayers. We've got to come up with some sort of mandated funding that comes from the state to help these counties, especially like Paiute, Garfield, Wayne counties.
That's what I was just going to ask. What other counties are really struggling with this?
Wayne County is really struggling, and so is Garfield. Garfield's got a lot better, but it's Darren's county is probably the worst.
Yeah, but it's across the state. We held a collective meeting in Richfield. We had 68 regional directors, EMS directors come in. It's across the state. We had Wasatch County, Cache County, San Juan County. They all arrived. They're all talking about the same problem.
Okay, let's move into some potential solutions. One of the things you gentlemen would like to see is moving jurisdiction from the Department of Health to DPS, the Department of Public Safety. Why do you like that as an alternative here?
Well, we think that there's a better alignment. We're talking about an emergency service, right? We're talking about an emergency scenario. That's not something the Department of Health generally does, right? That's not their routine. That is what the Department of Public Safety does. In addition, the Department of Public Safety has a very effective regional structure, a regional management structure, where they're over many of the dispatch centers, the highway patrol centers, and they work with law enforcement agents across the state. Those are also the same exact people that are on these ambulance calls.
I reached out to the Department of Health for comment on this, and I want to go ahead and pull up a response from them. This comes from Dr. Joseph Miner. He's the executive director, and this is what he says. He says, our ambulance and EMT licensing system operates very successfully, but funding to help rural communities purchase ambulances and staff their EMS services was lost in 2008. That $2 million annual funding was lost during the 2008 Great Recession and hasn't been restored. Representative Owen's bill moving the licensing services from our Bureau of EMS to DPS won't do anything to fix this funding problem. Your response to that?
It's not all about the funding.
Exactly.
It's not all about the funding. It's about organizational structure. It's about regional management structure. The Bureau completely eliminated any regional management structure. So we basically have a figurehead organization in Salt Lake City that the EMS directors across the state are in contact with. We believe there is a need for a full-on regional structure to manage this effectively across the state and support those agencies.
And to tie in with that, it's again, you can throw all the money at this you want until we figure a way to get people to want to get back into that field and take the time to be trained of what the requirements are. You know, it's tough. A lot of people don't like to be in this field. It's a tough field to be in.
It is fairly rare, though, across the country, is it not, to have it under a DPS structure?
There are 6 or 8 states that have done this and moved it into their emergency services. We believe it's much better aligned under emergency services, and we have a lot of support for that throughout the state to make that move.
Okay. Dr. Miner also went on and kind of talked about some of the possible solutions they've thrown out there. One of them being a small fee on different motor vehicle registrations, using a transient room tax, or making ambulance and EMT services essential services. I know you support the essential services part, but what about those other ideas?
Well, and again, we like them, but what we want to make sure is that we come up with a statewide solution and a statewide fund that'll help segue the funds to rural Utah, because we're having to take care of a lot of the urban state. We do not want this burden mandated on our local taxpayers.
One of the issues, people think that this is a money-making opportunity,
Exactly.
and from the Bureau themselves, they estimate $30.7 million was lost by servicing agencies in the state. Okay, that's their estimate. So agencies like mine, Mark's, you know, I realize as constituents get a fairly large ambulance bill, it's painful, but at the end of the day, across the state, we've lost $30.7 million in the agencies. We all have to report that to the state.
Okay. Go ahead, finish that thought.
So there has to be a funding model, we've looked at a bunch of different funding models, and Representative Owens has 2 or 3 options he's looking at with his bill to provide a substantial amount of funding into the Bureau, which it really needs.
Okay, and that would be through potentially rural hospital taxes, et cetera?
So there is another bill Representative Lyman is running, which allows 4th-class counties to use the rural hospital tax.
Real quick, we have less than a minute left, but I want to get on this point. You brought it up earlier, making this an essential service. Talk about why you think that is vital.
What my opinion on it is nobody is responsible for EMS right now. It's being done, right? It's being done in some cases by counties, some cases by municipalities, some cases by nonprofits, some cases by hospital. As we go to municipalities, if a county is providing the service, the municipality has no obligation to participate. And the same goes where the service is being provided by the cities, the counties have no obligation to participate. We need the whole entire team on the field.
Okay, we're going to have to end it on that note. Gentlemen, great conversation. We'll watch how this plays out through the legislative session. Always glad to have you on the show. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Still to come, a state lawmaker wants to create paid family leave for state employees. We'll take a look at that and other family planning bills a little bit later. But first, a new bill being considered on Utah's Capitol Hill would require pornography to have a warning label. And it's getting national attention. Hear from both sides after the break. A group of moms is rallying on Utah's Capitol Hill, asking lawmakers to take action on guns. The group is specifically pushing for 2 bills this legislative session. Guns always make for a heated debate during the legislative session, and this year is no different with the number of bills up for consideration. Moms demand action for gun sense in America is filling the rotunda with red to draw attention to the issue. This year they have 2 bills they are backing.
Both of them are common sense bills that have empower us to keep guns out of the hands of people who are either dangerous permanently or who may be a risk to themselves or others temporarily.
One is the Extreme Risk Protection Order sponsored by Layton Republican Steve Handy. It would create a court-ordered process to remove guns from those showing extreme risk to themselves or others. The second bill is universal background checks, sponsored by House Minority Leader Brian King. It would extend the background requirement to online sales and gun shows.
I think reasonable people agree that there's a group of people that we need to keep guns out of the hands of. And those are individuals who've been convicted of violent crimes, for example. People who've been convicted of domestic violence. People who have been judged mentally incompetent.
But not all lawmakers are on board with these bills, and both of them face a fight. Representative Corey Malloy opposes both.
They are truly gun control bills. They really have very little to do with protecting our society and more with just taking away guns from law-abiding citizens and responsible gun owners.
Malloy says one solution is a bill he passed last year. It allows anyone to temporarily and voluntarily surrender their gun to a local law enforcement agency with no questions asked. Representative Handy, by the way, tells me he doesn't think the Extreme Risk Protection Order will go anywhere this year. A new bill being proposed here in Utah is gaining national attention. It would require pornographic material to carry warning labels. One Utah lawmaker says it's what his constituents want, but an adult entertainment group says it's unconstitutional. ABC4's Brittany Johnson has both sides of the story.
Pornography under scrutiny on Utah's Capitol Hill. If House Bill 243 is signed into law, any content deemed pornographic would require a warning label. Anyone who distributes pornography without a visible warning could be sued for $2,500 per violation. The bill, proposed by Representative Brady Brammer.
I have parents reach out to me all the time that are saying, this is really hurting our family, it's hurting our children. Is there anything that can be done on this?
The bill is receiving pushback nationally. The Free Speech Coalition, an adult industry trade group based out of California, says this violates the First Amendment.
The bill is clearly
unconstitutional. The Supreme Court and state courts have ruled time and again that you cannot force an organization or an individual to carry a specific governmental message.
Obscene content has very little protections under the First Amendment.
Stabile also says the bill is too broad.
But basically, everyone from Game of Thrones to Kim Kardashian would have to put a warning label on any content that they put up, or they would be at risk of a lawsuit.
I hope it is taken seriously. This is not just a message bill. This has some real teeth, and it has some real consequence.
Brittany Johnson reporting for us. If there is a fine collected, by the way, half of that fine goes into Utah's Victim Rights Fund. To read the full bill for yourself, just head over to our website, abc4.com. Still to come, a bill is in the works to build on last year's 18-week abortion ban. What it will do and why some will be fighting it after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
This legislative session, lawmakers are considering a number of bills on family planning. That is an issue. It is one of the priorities for Alliance for a Better Utah. Lauren Simpson is the policy director for that organization. She's here now to go into greater detail. Lauren, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start off with family planning. That is a big issue that you guys are working on. And one of the bills, which was held in committee during the week for fiscal note purposes, is being sponsored by Senator Derek Kitchen, family planning. Talk to us about what that would do and what you guys like about that.
Yeah, so what we like about it is it would provide increased contraceptive access to low-income Utahns. So really it's about, at the end of the day, empowering people to start their families at a time that's right for them, and especially for people who right now might not be able to afford those kinds of contraceptives. And this is something that has passed, but was kind of rolled into the legislature's repeal and replace of Prop 3. But it's something that we've definitely seen support before, so we're really hopeful that there will be that same support this time around.
It also does something very important. As you mentioned, this is handled through the Medicaid program in the state. Currently, those who qualify are at 98% or below the poverty level. This would increase that to 250%, to my understanding. So that would really increase this program for a lot of Utahns here in our state.
Right, and as we've seen, there are a lot of people who, you know, might not qualify for Medicaid, but are still really struggling to make it by. And so I think anything that we can do to support these people, especially in something so fundamental like when is the right time to start my family, that's a choice that we just really want everybody to be empowered to have to make the decision that's right for them and their family.
And when you talk about family planning services, people might bring abortion into that conversation. This bill specifically says abortion is not part of this family planning services in this bill.
Yeah, it's just for contraceptives. And really, policies like this are actually what tends to reduce abortion overall, because when you have these long-lasting contraceptives, that reduces unplanned pregnancies or unintended pregnancies in a big way.
Another bill you guys are watching is paid parental leave by Representative Waite. I've done a story on this with her. Met with her during the week, and she was saying she's kind of making some changes to that. Not sure exactly what those are, but the premise of that bill that you guys are backing, go into that for us.
Yeah, so this bill for some state employees, it would give 6 weeks of paid leave. And honestly, as a new parent and as somebody who's watched this for a long time, like, this is a bill that will really make a big difference to people who are, you know, struggling with the financial burden of taking care of a new child, and also the emotional burden of not having to stress about some of that income. So they'll be able to take 6 weeks paid and add on to that 6 weeks of unpaid leave, which state employees already can do under FMLA.
We're seeing this conversation really across the country. Lawmakers in DC, here in Utah, are concerned about men and women having to choose between a family and a career. So this is for state employees. Is this something that you guys would like to see really across the board, even going to the private sector as well, eventually?
Yeah, and to give due credit, we've really seen our private sector, especially the tech sector, I think really nudge Utah in the right direction in terms of the parental leave policies that they offer. This is obviously something that in the long run we'd love to see for everybody, but I think the state kind of has to take a stand and be willing to, you know, stand up for working families and make progress in that area.
Well, that's one of the points Representative Waite made as well, is that the state's kind of lagging behind and perhaps missing out on talented employees because they can go get that in other areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to another very important issue. Couples who struggle to have children. Very emotional for them. There's a bill that would require insurances to cover IVF. Talk about that.
Yeah, and this wouldn't apply to everybody, but it would, you know, for certain health conditions, after 5 years, after, you know, you've tried some less invasive measures, it would require your insurance to cover IVF. And for anyone who's ever struggled to have a child or knows someone who struggled to have a child, you know, what an emotional burden that is, and also what a financial burden that is. And I think anything, again, it just comes back to anything we can do to empower people to be able to have the families that they want to have is a great move for a family-friendly state like Utah.
Yeah, I caught up with Representative Stoddard, who's sponsoring that bill, and he was a bit concerned about the fiscal note, but said, if anything else, it's a conversation starter. Some of these bills that we've talked about here are probably an uphill battle, but do you like at least getting them on the radar and moving forward from here?
Absolutely, and these conversations are things that ordinary Utahns are talking about all the time. So, you know, this isn't anything new that the legislature's starting to talk about it. Really, they're just catching up. And, you know, if we really want to support families in a systemic way, that takes money. And right now, individual families are bearing that cost burden. But I think for the state to show up and support families, it's going to cost some money, and we're fine with that.
Let's move into abortion. We passed an 18-week ban last year. Now some lawmakers are looking to build on that. One would be a virtual ban on abortion. Another would require a mother to get an ultrasound before an abortion. You guys stand opposed to those bills. Why?
We do, really for the same reasons. We just really support people's individual agency to make the choices that are right for them and their families. And I really believe, like, we can trust families, we can trust women to make good decisions. We know through some state polling, a majority of Utahns actually support Roe v. Wade. A lot of times on these bills, especially these really extreme bills, you hear some really loud voices, but I think most people, you know, while they might not think that that's a decision that they would make for themselves, they recognize that there's some pretty compelling personal circumstances that might, you know, somebody might make a different decision than they would, and that's okay. You know, we can give them the space to have that agency and make that choice.
Last year's bill, working its way through the courts, we're seeing cases all across the country in the courts. Senator McKay's bill would be a trigger bill, meaning that if the courts weighed in on it, then it would kick in. So what's wrong with having that there and ready to go if the courts ultimately do decide that that is a state's right?
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't want to live in a place with a virtual ban on abortion. I don't want people to not have that option. And I think when you talk to people, when you have individual conversations one-on-one about what that actually means, even though it's a decision that some people might not make for themselves, like, we recognize that's a really personal decision that women should make with their partner, with their doctor, with their faith, if they're a person of faith. It's just a really personal decision. And if Utah wants to support families, there are great systemic ways to do that. Let's do increased contraceptive access. Let's, you know, better educate our kids about healthy sexual relationships. Let's support families economically with the burden of having a child. But to punish women for a really personal choice isn't the way to do it.
Okay, I wanted to get into education funding, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Where can our viewers learn more about you and your organization?
BetterUtah.org.
Okay, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate having you with us.
Thanks so much.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The legislative session runs through Thursday, March 12th. The presidential primary for Utah is Super Tuesday, that's March 3rd. State conventions for both Utah Republicans and Democrats are set for Saturday, April 25th. And the primary election is Tuesday, June 30th. Make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com, or you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.